everybody. I'm Louise Gittleman, and I'm back from my cruise, and it indeed was a cruise to lose. So before I tell you about all my secrets and how I actually lost 5 pounds and I was away for 13 days, I want to just share with you some concerns that I have about the viral conditions that we are now being faced with and challenged. While I don't feel we should be in panic mode, I do feel that precaution, preparation, and prevention are probably very important. So in preparing for my cruise to lose, which occurred on February 16th, I did some things that I always do, and that is number one, I loaded up on vitamin C. I take a particular vitamin C, which is called Vitality C, which contains 4 grams per teaspoon, and I took that 3 to 4 times a day. The reason that I think C is so important is it's not only antiviral, it's antibacterial, and there's some concerns that the coronavirus may not in fact be a virus, but could be a mycobacteria. We'll get to that in a minute. So updating and upgrading your vitamin C, which you can get at unikeyhealth.com, I made sure that they're well stocked, I think is exceedingly important. At least this is what I did. I did a lot of vitamin C. I did about 12 to about 16 grams a day of vitamin C. I took the teaspoons throughout the day. That was number one. Number two, what I did to protect specifically against virus was I purchased something called Vira Attack. Now the reason I love this Vira Attack is because not only is it inexpensive, but it's available throughout the country in Herb Farm. I think you can get this at any health food store. And the reason I like this so much is that one of the main ingredients is the ingredient called lomation, which is a Native American herb, and I talked about that in a previous Facebook Live. And this particular herb was used during the 1918 flu epidemic and was very helpful in preventing flu deaths and preventing against the influenza type issues that come with any kind of flu/virus. So I took this with me as well. It's called Vira-Attack Immune Support. It's also good for any other kind of virus. And in addition to this, as well as my vitamin C, I took more Berberine because I was able to do some research before I left and discovered that at least 500 milligrams of Berberine, which you all know because it's so important in modifying your blood sugar, regulating and modifying blood sugar for those of us that are type 2 diabetics, but it's also a potent antiviral. Now I want you to remember this because whether we're trying to prevent any kind of viral infection, whether it's the coronavirus or the flu, this was also very specifically used for cytomegalo as well as Lyme's disease, which of course is a rickettsia, and all the co-infections, as well as Epstein-Barr. So Berberine was kind of a gem that I discovered during my research in preventing any kind of viral attack as I was on the road. When I was on the airplane, I took plenty of Clorox wipes, which I do in any case. I didn't do anything much different except to add on some more vitamin C, got my special Vira Attack that contains lomation. But I also put on my little mini air filter, which is a mini-made air filtration system that I wear all the time. I made sure I got a new one for this particular flight because I was flying from Idaho to Fort Lauderdale and then back, of course, from Fort Lauderdale to Idaho on the return visit. So I use this, which sprays out a little bit of ozone, very purifying, and I've used this for every kind of flight that I've taken for years. Now the first thing that I did when I arrived in Florida was I didn't take more vitamin C or more Vira Attack, but I did a salt and soda bath because when you are flying you're exposed to a very immunosuppressive agent, which nobody is talking about but me lately, which is radiation. You're at 30,000 feet, sometimes higher. You're exposed to a great deal of gamma radiation, not to mention the Wi-Fi, which is all over the place. So I take with me, I measure out 2 cups of salt, 2 cups of baking soda, and I put that in a big plastic bag. And when I get to the hotel, which I make sure has a bathtub, I soak in that to kind of neutralize the radiation. This was taught to me, as I have mentioned to you before, by my teacher, Dr. Parcells, many moons ago, because she worked with the Oppenheimers when they were doing their Los Alamos testing in 1945. And she found that that combination of sea salt, it wasn't Epsom salt she used, my friends, but sea salt and baking soda was very helpful to bring down the high acidity that one gets when one is exposed to too much radiation. So that's the first thing that I did. And let's not forget that I think today is the National Day of Deplugging. So if you can deplug not just for today, but once a week, it'd be very helpful to reduce your exposure to electro pollution. So on the boat now, I'm on the boat, and I think the concern about coronavirus was just beginning to be very widespread. I was on a Princess boat. I was on the Regal Princess, and it was the Diamond Princess that was quarantined. So naturally, when I was in Florida before we left the harbor, I was receiving emails from all of my friends all across the country who were so concerned that I was on the wrong Princess boat. But in fact, I was not, and they took some wonderful precautions when we were on the boat. The irony of the whole situation is that shortly after coming back to Idaho from the cruise and being in Florida for several days, which I totally enjoyed and totally loved, I had to make an emergency visit to Seattle, where there truly is a concern with regard to the coronavirus infection. That's a whole other story for another day. Our plane was delayed by about 2 hours because somebody had gotten physically sick on the plane. So out came my mini-mate little ionizer, out came my Clorox wipes, and then I did take more Vira Attack as I had it with me in my bag. So to remember very briefly about any kind of viral concern, which I always have at this time of the year, I think you need to remember two things, first and foremost, in terms of basic nutrition. In our previous Facebook Live, I talked about 200 mcgs of selenium. I think you should be taking that daily regardless, so that's number one. Then number two, more vitamin C because it's so antibacterial and antiviral in general. And then number three, specifically for this particular virus, and I'll repeat it again, is the lomation, and there's a combination of lomation and lemon balm and echinacea in this particular virus attack, which is so easy to find in most health food stores throughout the country. Now, the antiviral / anti-infection vitamin is none other than vitamin A. So if you feel that you are coming down with something, whether it is a virus, whether it is another type of, let's say it's a bacterial issue, even a parasitic concern, you should be upgrading your vitamin A. I personally recommend, and it concerns me that nobody's taking vitamin A anymore because of concerns about toxicity, which I think have been overblown, that you would do a loading dose of 100,000 IUs for 3 days. That's 100,000 IUs of vitamin A for 3 days. Vitamin A clinically has been used as the anti-infection vitamin for years. Now, when I did my work, and I worked very closely with Dr. Robert Atkins in the 1990s, he recommended 200,000 IUs, but I know if I recommend that amount, everybody will say, vitamin A toxicity. He used to use it for a week or 2 weeks at a time, and he felt that it warded off any kind of bacterial or viral concern. In addition to the vitamin A, which is a must, I think, in this day and age, and the maintenance dose is about 25,000 IUs of true vitamin A, not the beta-carotene, but the vitamin A itself. You need to accompany that with the antiviral mineral, and the antiviral mineral is zinc, so you should be loading up on zinc lozenges. And if you don't load up on a zinc lozenge, make sure that your multi or another mineral supplement contains at least 45 milligrams of zinc. More than that may compete with copper and other minerals, but you want at least 45 milligrams of zinc. So there you have it. You've got your C, you got your lomation, you've got your vitamin A, you've got your zinc, you got your selenium, and of course vitamin D for those of us that live in the parallel above the 38th, in which case we're not getting enough vitamin D, and you should make sure that your levels are at least 5,000 to probably 10,000 IUs a day. And remember that vitamin D is not really a vitamin, it truly is a hormone. So taking enough hormone D is also key. So all of these recommendations are not just specific for the coronavirus, they're specific for any kind of viral issue that you may be concerned about. Even Epstein-Barr, as I've mentioned, and some people have used these very same protocols to really be able to control their Lyme. Now, for what I did to lose weight on the boat, well, I do 3 or 4 different things. The first thing is that I make sure that rather than taking the elevator, I walk. And you can apply any of these principles to any kind of vacation. It need not be a cruise. You could be on vacation. You could be at a reunion, you could be at a hotel on a business trip, but I make sure that I walk up the stairs and I walk down the stairs. Now, in the case of the cruise, most of the activities were on the 5th floor. My room was on the 14th floor. There was no 13th level. So I was on the 14th floor. So that's about 7 or 8 levels of stairs that I was walking up and down every single day. I did that. I also walked on top of the boat. There's like a little walking space. I did that for about 2 miles. I also ate very specifically. I'll talk to you about that in the food combining rules that truly allowed me to have really good digestion and allowed me to lose more inches even than the pounds. And I made sure that I got to bed at a reasonable hour. So I did all of those things and feel that if you employ any of those elements in any kind of vacation or recreational activity, you too can lose. You can lose to win and win the losing game. So the food combining rules that I always relate to and go back to are those rules that I learned many, many years ago from my teacher, who was a master, and she was 84 years young when she first began to teach me. I mean, I started to pay attention in that February of 1974 when I was at her class, and I was a very young girl at that time. When people would come in and they would disturb her and say, "Dr. Parcells, the Queen is on the phone." And I would say to somebody, I'd say, "What Queen? Who are we talking about?" And of course, at that point, it was the Queen of England. So she was being consulted by the Queen of England, the King of Spain. The FBI would consult her with missing persons. It's a whole other issue. But she was so extraordinary that I really learned to respect and honor her way back in '74 until she died in the year 1996. So what she taught me back then is really buried research that was done in the early to mid-50s at Sierra State University, which was in Los Angeles at the time. I believe it was a naturopathic college. She was a head of nutrition at the Sierra State University. And she practiced as a clinician there for about 5 to 10 years, and she did all kinds of pH experiments with different food combinations, and she came up with a listing of kind of principles that people should use to enhance their weight loss, to enhance digestion, and to enhance their ability to ward off disease. So here they are. You're going to get them straight from the horse's mouth, which is me when I was there as a little young girl in 1974, and I remember it to this day. So whenever I need to go back to some kind of rules and regulations when I'm faced with nonstop food, morning, noon, and night, as you are on a cruise, this was a very strong foundation for me to relate to. So number one, when you're eating your food, you eat 1 protein per meal. There's no such thing as surf and turf. If you're going to be eating fish or chicken or lamb or tofu or tempeh, non-organic, of course, non-GMO in those cases, or even beans, which is considered a protein/starch, then you have 1 protein per meal. You do not combine that with another protein unless the protein is eggs, in which case it is very neutral. So it's 1 protein per meal. In other words, you wouldn't have from some sauteed calamari for your appetizer and then order some seared lamb, for example, for your main meal. It's 1 protein per meal. It is 1 starch per meal, and it's a non-gluten starch. If you eat your protein food, which is an animal protein, let's say, with a gluten-rich food, they will not combine properly together because it's a combination of 2 various proteins. Gluten is a proteinaceous type substance which competes with the protein that you're eating in the animal food. So, for example, at lunch, for example, I'm going to give you what I ate. I would eat, let's say, a piece of fish. They had some wonderful fish, or they had chicken, or they had lamb. They had great lamb curry, which I can just taste to this day. And if I wanted a non-gluten starch, I used to have a little bit of basmati rice, about a half a cup. I'm very good at eyeballing the portions. I do believe in truth-telling about portion control. It does work. I do a little bit of either basmati rice, or I do a little bit of corn polenta, or I may do a little bit of green peas they had, or a little bit of carrots, or a little bit of sweet potato. That would be my starch, which I then complemented with a huge green salad, because every day on the cruise there were huge, huge salad bars. And every day I took something different, but I always made sure that I took something that was bitter. So they had some great bitters, some escarole, they had some arugula, they had dandelion greens, I think, one day. And you know, bitter is better because it helps you to digest even more sufficiently. So having a little bitter taste in your body also will start the digestive fluids humming along, and will also be helpful to break up any kind of fat in your liver or your gallbladder. So I used to take a big salad, a little bit of starch, which I took at my afternoon meal. I didn't do it in the evening, but I did it at the afternoon meal. My breakfasts were always sautéed greens. I had a combination of arugula. They were able to find arugula for me in the morning. Arugula. We had arugula, I had broccoli, and I had a little bit of spinach with a lot of garlic. I'm always asking people to cook with a lot of garlic because it's antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. A lot of garlic, and it was finished off with a tad of extra virgin real olive oil. Then I had them do 2 poached eggs, as I wasn't sure that they were using 100% virgin olive oil or butter at every meal, so I'd have 2 poached eggs. I had the greens, and I also had a few seeds. So the seeds are a source of protein in the eggs, but the eggs are neutral, so they don't really count as a source of second protein. They used to get me just a whole bunch. They used to call me Birdie, because they would bring down for me a whole little bowl of, I was craving sunflower seeds for some reason, and I love sunflower seeds because they're very high in the B vitamins, especially riboflavin, very good for the skin, and a very high source of the good omega-6s. When the omega-6s are not cooked and they're raw and they're not altered in any way, they're really helpful for beautiful skin and for the moisture barrier in your skin to stay intact. So I'd have that every morning. I'd have my lunch and then a wonderful dinner where there was only one protein, lots of vegetables, another salad. We would eat at the Italian restaurant because the oil was 100% extra virgin. And on the very first day of the cruise, so that I didn't feel as if I were deprived, there was some wonderful bread that they bring to the table, and the bread is just delightful. They have 5 or 6 different kinds. I would make sure that I chose a sourdough bread because the sourdough is able to neutralize the gluten a little bit more effectively. And I took a little bit of the crust, dipped it in olive oil, and that was my treat. I swear to God, that was my treat throughout the cruise. For desserts, I'm not a dessert eater. I'm just very disciplined when it comes to sweets, but I did enjoy, and this goes back to one of the Parcells rules of food combinations, a little bit of fresh pineapple and one day fresh papaya, because I always remember that you are not supposed to combine fruits with vegetables at the same meal unless it's a smoothie in the morning and you're just using this in a liquid form because you don't have any other food in your system because it's breakfast. So for a regular meal, if you wanted to have a little dessert, the best dessert was fresh pineapple, which I totally adore. If they had had some coconut cream, I would have put a little bit of that on there. And then sometimes I had a little fresh papaya. Now, the reason we use the fresh pineapple is because it's high in digestive enzymes, the same thing with the papaya. But that is what I did. When it came to any kind of spiritual spirits, when it came to any kind of alcohol, the only kind of alcohol that I really drink these days is not wine, is not beer, but is a little bit of vodka, because I come from a Russian ancestry, and I remember my grandparents taking a little bit of vodka every other night. I mean, they would have what they call a little nip. It was a little schnapps, but it wasn't brandy, it was vodka that they used. The vodka that I personally love, which they didn't have on the boat, but the one that I love is Dan Aykroyd's vodka, and it's called Crystal Skull, I think. It was given to us as a gift last July 4th, and I still use that. So my little drink, and I had a drink once, maybe twice during the cruise, was a little bit of vodka with a little bit of unsweetened cranberry, because I brought a little bit of cranberry juice concentrate with me. I'm just so geared to cranberry. It's my signature drink. And a little bit of mineral water with a lot of lime. And it's just so satisfying and so smooth. So that is what I did. I lost the 5 pounds, I lost inches, I came back reinvigorated, and I came back with everybody still concerned that I was on the wrong princess boat and maybe had been exposed to, God forbid, some kind of coronavirus. So what we have since learned about all of this is that the coronavirus may in fact not be a virus. It may in fact be a mycobacterium, which looks a lot like an atypical tuberculosis under the microscope. So any kind of precaution that you take should be antiviral, antibacterial, and even anti-malarial. There's some concern that there's certain anti-malarial medicines that they're now using in China because this also may present as some kind of malarial type disease. So we're not quite sure what we're dealing with, folks. So whatever it is, let's take precautions, do any kind of natural substance we can that is all-encompassing, that is a broad spectrum, and you too will be happy and healthy for a very long time. Now, that is my spiel. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and my good friend Matt, who's at the other side of this camera, may read me the questions. Any questions, Mr. Matt?
Yes, Laura Ruley.
Laura, hi, Laura.
She is leaving in 2 weeks to fly back to Connecticut from Florida.
Oh.
Any advice on staying virus-free? I know you talked about it earlier, but...
Yes, I would get a little bit of this. I've got to read this a little bit more carefully. It's called Mini-Made Ionic Air Supply. You can get it at cwrenviro.com. cwrenviro.com. I would do this. I would get your Clorox wipes, which I use regardless of the coronavirus scare, and I'd wipe down the seats, the seat belt, any kind of television screen, computer screen, any kind of tray area. I would use that, and then get a little bit of this Vitality C. This was created by a cancer survivor who was probably one of the most intelligent individuals I've ever had the pleasure of listening to, who talked about natural therapies against cancer. And this is sold through Unikey. I made sure that Unikey could stock up. As you know, I'm a brand ambassador for UnikeyHealth.com, and take 2 to 3 teaspoons before you go on the plane. That is what I would do, and just for, how should we say this, and just for extra precaution, a little bit of the Vira attack. Maybe stick a little bit in your purse, put a little bit in water, because this stuff has lomation in there, which is so anti-influenza. So that's what I would do without getting terribly crazy or concerned. Again, it's precaution, it's preparation, not panic. Matt, any other questions?
So someone had asked about why not mixing fruits and vegetables.
Because fruits and vegetables don't mix, because fruits are digested very quickly in the system, and when they're held up, they can ferment in your body. So if you're going to be taking any kind of fruit, the only one that is digestible raw, I'm still on overload and jet lag a little bit, is going to be your raw pineapple or your raw papaya. The other things that Dr. Parcells was adamant about is if you're going to be eating a little bit of beans, which is a combination of protein, and it's a wonderful source of non-animal protein, of protein as well as carbohydrates, that you do not use any other starch with that. You just have your beans as your main source of protein and starch, and augment around that with lots of green leafy vegetables and green steamed vegetables. So that's what she did, and she, at the age of 106, was as sharp as a tack.
This is my question. What do you drink besides having an occasional alcoholic beverage on the cruise? But what did I drink?
What did I drink on the cruise? Well, the water was filtered, number one. Number two, I did bottled water. I did Pano. We did Pano, flat Pano all the time. I just like the taste of it. That to me is one of the healthiest waters. I just did a podcast with an individual that's a water expert, Dr. Roy Spicer, and he says that in terms of bottled water, Mountain Valley is one of the most unhealthy. So I chose the Pano water. When we were out at the various ports, we went to St. Thomas, which was totally lovely. I went to a Pirates Museum that I fell in love with there. We went to St. Martin's, which was totally lovely as well. And I think I had bottled water there. I may have had Perrier, I think is what I took, a little bit of Perrier.
Very good. That's it for questions.
Okay, so I'm going to have my team post this week's blog, which will give you more insight in terms of why Asians may be a little bit more susceptible to the coronavirus and other kinds of viral situations than the Caucasians. There's a little genetic issue that comes into play there. So regardless of your ancestry, more vitamin C to the rescue. This is the most important vitamin of all. So stay healthy, stay happy. See you next time.